Hi, and welcome to Your Inside Power, part of the Win-Win Women Network. My name is Patricia Stepler, and at Your Inside Power, we are looking to empower you to learn to live from your inside out instead of allowing the outside world to determine your success. You determine it yourself. I want to start today with a quote from Napoleon Hill, because our topic today is that negative voice, or those negative thoughts that we have spinning in our heads all day. And so Napoleon Hill in Think and Grow Rich says, no thought, whether it be negative or positive, can enter the subconscious mind without the aid of the principle of autosuggestion, with the exception of thoughts picked up from the ether. So thoughts that are just kind of floating around there, and you can get those, and sometimes they'll go straight into your subconscious. What he's talking about here is that we have two parts of our mind, our conscious mind and our subconscious mind. Our conscious mind, if you think of like antennas on the top of your head, it's the way Bob Proctor always explained it, just made so much sense. But if you think of you having antennas on the top of your head, and you are attracting, or you are communicating with the world through your five senses, that's going into your conscious mind. That's the part where we think. That's the part where we decide, get ideas, is in the conscious mind. The only way it gets into the subconscious mind is when you keep thinking about it, you focus on it, and you use autosuggestion. So you're telling yourself, that this is what you want. You keep repeating it over and over again. And that's the only way to get it in that subconscious mind, unless I guess it's something from either. Now, what I want you to realize is that the opinions that you have, the opinions that other people have, and you have a contrast. And I don't really like to get into politics, but let's just look at conservatives and liberals. If you ever talk to a conservative about a topic, they have one frame of mind, they have one idea, and they look at it from one perspective. And then you go over and you talk about the same thing to somebody in the liberal side, and they will have like a totally opposite idea. And so they'll have their point of view. Now, the problem and why government doesn't work so often is because these two points of views are so opposite, and the way they look at the world and the way they perceive what's going on is totally different. And because of that, that's why nothing gets done, nothing gets accomplished, because they can't see the road to compromise. And so it's a perception thing, but it's how they see the world. And you see, your subconscious mind is full. It is full of ideas that are a reflection of how you think and what your thought process is. And so when something doesn't agree with it, you just reject it. And so this is what happens with, back to the conservatives and liberals, is that the liberals look at conservatives and they can't understand how anybody could think like they think. And a conservative looks like a liberal and thinks, I don't understand how they think at all. So you just have those two different perspectives because it's the way they view the world. And when we can understand that, and as business owners and as leaders in the community, when you can understand that people have different perspectives, not because they're right or they're wrong, it's just they see the world differently. And then you can really start to understand what's going on and how to find neutral ground. So the brain uses and processes through the conscious mind and the subconscious mind, processes information completely differently. The conscious mind has the ability to filter out what it does not believe. And so anything that's coming in through your senses, and you can say, I don't believe that. And then you just dismiss it from you. If it's something that you do believe, you think upon it, and then it transfers into your subconscious. Subconscious mind does not have the ability to filter anything. So whatever is out there and just goes in, that's what's happening. That's how people can get brainwashed, because their mind is completely open and they allow whatever they're being told to go in as the truth, and they don't filter out anything. And that's how that can happen, because it's all going in the subconscious mind. So here's the good thing. You have the choice. You have the choice to have negative thinking, which would be things like being jealous of others, feeling like you're the victim, thinking that other people have things and they have advantages that you don't have. And you can have fear, worry, doubt, all those negative ideas, or you have the choice to be grateful, to be generous, to be loving, to be kind, to be self-confident, to think of abundance, and to be hopeful. And the choice is yours. And you see, this is what happens when people, when they want to take from somebody else, it's generally because they have one of those thoughts of jealousy, or maybe they're afraid that they've got that poverty thinking, and so they want to take from others. But the thing is, you have the ability and you have the choice to decide your kind of life. Now, a long time ago, I didn't believe that. You know, I was one of those people that had fear and anger, jealousy, and that, because I didn't realize it was my choice. So there's nothing unusual about that. A lot of people go through that. But as I started to study and become more aware, I realized that everything in my life I had decided on. And that was a little tough to swallow at first too, because that meant consciously or subconsciously, it was a choice. Well, why would I say subconsciously? Well, because if I had allowed thoughts and feelings and emotions to be transferred into my subconscious, that became who I was. And so I had to change that whole thinking from negative to positive, and realize that negative and positive, they're both very powerful. In fact, a lot of times negative seems like it's a lot more powerful. Why? Because it just seems to be inside of us. It just seems to become very natural. Well, why does it come naturally to? Let's think back to, the time of the cavemen. Okay, if you had to be aware of your surroundings at all times so that you would not be attacked and that you would be safe. So it was a survival. And so that same feeling of survival, it's still part of our brains. And so it's really easy to think that negative feeling and to be concerned about, have that negative ideas going through us. You have to decide that which part of you are you going to nourish? Are you going to nourish that negative part? Are you going to nourish those feelings? Or are you going to nourish the good that will serve you well? And that's a decision you have to make. So habits can be very generational, and you have to think about how what it is that you want, and is there something you want to change? Now, honestly, when I was raising my kids, I just started to become a little more aware, did some personal growth. And I didn't really understand all about the mind that I do now, and that I've learned since then. But at that time, I just knew that there were things that I wanted that I would have liked to have had in my family when I was growing up. One of them was for my brother and I to be closer. We were very close when we were little. My parents were like nurturing that. And then somewhere along the line, that got all messed up. I don't know where. And it's not that we're not close, but we're not super close, And I wanted my kids to always be there for each other. And so that was something I nurtured. It was something that I really wanted to have happen. And so I felt like I changed that. The other thing I wanted to change was there were times when I was growing up that I wanted to do something. And my parents, instead of saying, yeah, go ahead, try, it was more like, oh, we can't. And they, say we don't have the money, which, sometimes that's true. You don't necessarily have the money. But other times it was things that it just didn't want me to do. They were trying to protect me for some reason. And so with my kids, I kept trying to encourage them to as I say to them, spread their wings and fly. And there were times that my mom would get pretty upset because I was allowing my kids to spread their wings and fly. She didn't necessarily think I should. But I that was something I wanted to change. I wanted them to know that, they can try different things. It's okay. And we'll figure out a way to find the money to pay for it. So, just what things do you want? What things are you looking for? And then when you're doing those things, is it serving you? Is it serving you well if you're thinking of poverty instead of abundance? Is it serving you well if you're jealous instead of grateful? Which one's going to serve you better and make you a better person and attract the things too that you need? So we really have to think about that. Keep in mind that what you give energy to and you focus on, that's what you're going to attract. So if you give energy to worry, to fear, to doubts, if you give energy to them, that's what you're going to attract, even if consciously that's not what you want. And that's why we have to be so careful, even how we word like an affirmation, because if you don't word it correctly, you are actually going to attract the very thing you don't want. So it's super important that we are very conscious of the words we're saying and the thoughts we're thinking. Okay. All right. So next thing, I want you to think about people that you know and whether they're negative or positive. I had this person that was in my life at a time, and they were just super negative. They were jealous. They were envious of others. They had worry, doubt. They had poverty thinking, pretty much a lot of those things that you don't really want to have in your negative mind. And I remember one time they came to me for help. And I was trying to be very positive, but at some point it was like, I'm done with this. I'm doing everything I can to help you. And you are just like vomiting all over, and it was just so annoying. And I asked them to leave. And they were so shocked that I asked them to leave, but I was done. My kids were hearing all this stuff. I was like, no, I am in charge of protecting my children. You need to leave. And, we just have to realize sometimes we have to let people go out of our lives that are not serving us well. And they are draining us, because that's what I felt like. I was up here and then I was like smack down at the bottom. And sometimes we just have to allow those people who are never going to change because they wallow in their sorrows, and it's never going to change. So sometimes we have to allow those people to go out of our lives. Now, maybe it's relative and you can't, completely let them go, but you can choose not to hang around them too much because you have a choice. So positive minds tend to be more creative minds coming up with ideas. Why? Well, because if you're looking for the good in everything, and you're looking for ideas and you've given energy and focus to that, you're going to get those creative ideas, and opportunities are going to come to you that you never ever expect. And then you wonder, like, how did that happen? And then if you really start to look back, you're going to say, well, it's because I changed who I am. So it become really good. So sometimes being positive is easier said than done. because stuff happens. Stuff will happen in your life, and then you get frustrated. And that's normal too. That's a normal reaction. We want to be really positive, and then something goes wrong and you think, why? There are so many times in my business I could have just stopped because things weren't going well. I, wasn't getting a client, or, I was confused as to what I was doing. It was all my fault. I'm not blaming on anybody. It was all my fault. I didn't know. I don't know what I don't know, right? And, there's so many times that I could have just given up and just said, this doesn't work. But you know what? In Napoleon Hill's book, Think and Grow Rich, he talks about persistence. In fact, he spends an entire chapter on persistence. And if you persist and you keep learning, now there's a difference between just keep doing the same thing over and over again and expecting it's going to change, because that's definition of insanity, right? But if you persist and you keep learning and you keep striving and you keep, experiencing things and learning from experience, and you keep seeking the help of people who will come your way, I guarantee you, if you focus on it, the right person will come your way that is able to help you. You will eventually win. Why? Because that's the law of the universe, and that has to be the way it works. But it's sometimes easier said than done. Let's we live in a very negative world, and it's easy to be sucked into that negativity, and it takes work to stay positive. And that little voice inside your head will say, well, who do you think you are? You're not good enough. You're not smart enough. You're not pretty enough. You're not this or that or the other thing. And that voice will talk you out of the very thing that you want to do. Don't let it. Stand up for yourself. Make the choice, make the decision that today's your day, and this is the day you're going to change. You want to start looking and finding those opportunities, not seeing the problems, which are so easy to do. So why does that happen? Well, because it's the way our brain is wired. Our brain is wired to remember when bad things happen to us, and that negative aspect is there. And so remember, the brain is trying to protect us, right? So when something similar happens, then your brain will go back to that memory and find that memory and goes, oh, you know what happened last time? Something like this. You don't want to do that again. And so stop you. So we have to constantly be fighting our own brains to say, no, that's not going to happen again because I learned this, this, and this. But it always tends to go back to those negative experiences. So why not redirect your brain to go to a more positive experience and say, oh, no. But remember when this, that, and that happened and the outcome was different. So we have to work. We have to work to find those positive things, because naturally we'll just get the negative. So that's what keeps people stuck. That very thing of those memories coming back keeps us stuck, because it won't let us get out of our comfort zone. It wants to keep us safe. Sometimes that's a good thing. Sometimes we need to remember so that we can move ahead. But a lot of times that we just have to work to really overcome it. So focus on why you can do something instead of why you can't do something. And allow that to be your guiding light. How can I do this? And think of the what if, what if, and recall, maybe something successful or some way it can be successful, instead of looking at why it can't. What would happen? Wonder what would happen if, just wonder if this, that, and the other thing, how that would impact your life. So the same part of your brain that is negative also has part of it that helps you to plan and strategize and to learn and to focus and to make decisions. It's all part of the same part of the brain. It's just the other side of it. So you have that one part, which is very negative, and then you have the other side of it, which is helping you to plan. So what we need to do is to focus on the part that will help us to plan and strategize and make decisions and, try to snuff out the part that makes us question ourselves and that part that keeps us stuck. So let's talk about some ways that we can do this. Well, first of all, it's the awareness. Awareness is everything. Everything. When you start to stop and think, instead of just going through the motions, and you start analyzing situations, you're going to start to be more aware. Reading books helps you be more aware. Anytime you can do some personal development, getting a coach that will point things out to you and make you aware. Because a lot of times we're so ingrained and habitually, I know I've said this before, 95 to 97% of our day is habitual. And that means we're just going through the motions. As long as we allow ourselves to just keep going through those same emotions, the same thought processes, we just make them stronger. But when you stop and question yourself and question why you do certain things or why you're thinking certain things, that will start to bring more awareness. So the awareness of the thoughts that you have, the awareness of the emotions that you have, the awareness of the things you're saying. Sometimes you might go, why did I say that? Stop and think, why did you say that? Becoming more aware. And when you do that, you can then start to shift your thoughts and the words that you're saying and shift them to the opposite. That what if? What if this could be the answer? What if this person coming into my life is the right person? What if I hired a coach? What if? And allow those what ifs to come in. And then reset it. And, sometimes we have to, get rid of all the anxiety. See, take some deep breaths and let go. Let go of that negative emotion and decide what positive emotion you want to bring in. So you might want to let go of the fear and bring in the confidence. Let go of the anxiety and bring in the confidence. Let go of the poverty thoughts, bring in the abundance, and just breathe in and out so that you're resetting your thoughts. Look for triggers. What triggered you? If you had this very negative emotion, what triggered it? Was it a person? Was it what they said? If a person's triggering you, stay away from them. Stay away from them. If it's something they say, why did that trigger it? And think about what kind of topics, and again, stay away from it. If something or someone is not helping you, then they're hurting you. Okay, so sometimes we have to really look at, how that person or, whatever is causing you to feel bad about who you are. And, what is it triggering in you? And then once you do that, then start to identify patterns maybe that you can go back and notice. What habitual patterns are there that you keep doing over and over again? And start questioning them and start to shift them. Usually the opposite is where you need to shift to. What you're doing now, what's the exact opposite of it? And start to visualize that, start to affirm that with the words that you're saying, the thoughts you're thinking, the emotions, and start to replace that negative with the positive that's going to help you. And then sometimes what we can do is we can anchor that. As you're thinking of that positive, maybe just tap your shoulder. Maybe just hold your hands together. And then that starts to be an anchor. And then when you touch your shoulder, touch, hold your hands, touch your forehead. Anytime you do that, you continue to anchor that positive idea. So hopefully those are some really good thoughts. Again, I want to go back to Napoleon Hill's quote: "No thought, whether it be negative or positive, can enter the subconscious mind without the aid of the principle of autosuggestion." That means you, the aid of your thoughts, autosuggestion, with the exception of thoughts picked up from the ether. And those are thoughts that are probably coming to you because you've been thinking and putting something out into the universe. And so now the universe is responding back to you. So those are the ideas. You have a choice. You have a choice to the thoughts that you think. Nobody can change that for you. It's your choice what you want to think. Now, let's think about this. You can go along with what the masses are out there thinking, and that can impact your life for sure. Or you can decide to, no, I'm not going to think like them. I'm going to think the way I want to think. So I have put my link into the information there, and I just want you to know that for sure, reach out to me. Let's have a quick conversation, and I'll see if there's something I can do to help you. And if I can, then we'll have a longer conversation. We'll map out a plan for your life and for things that you need or for your business. And I will help you to move from where you are to where you really want to be, and make the choices that are going to serve you well instead of the choices that do not serve you well. This is Patricia Stepler with your Inside Power. Remember, we want to live from the inside out so that we make the choices in our lives.